Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on finding your next job in the new world of work, social media and LinkedIn update. Just some introductions, although some of you may know us already. Claire Rogers is joining us today. We're very pleased to welcome Claire back. Claire used to work for HR Solutions in the past, and some of you may have spoken to you if you've ever used our helpline. But Claire's specialism is in outplacement and working with people to help find them their new role, or if they've suddenly found themselves in the marketplace, having been out of work for a long time. That's where Claire has particular gifts, and so we've invited her today to join us in trying to help you if you find yourself in the same position. I am Sue Watson, the HR Operations Manager at HR Solutions, and so I'm very pleased to join you today. We will be inviting you to ask questions. You will notice that you are on mute. There are so many attendees on the webinar today that we have to keep everybody on mute. But having said that, we do want to hear your questions. So we will ask you to submit them throughout the webinar as you think of them, but we will field them at the end. The way you do this is in your panel. It will look something like this. You will see that there is a questions panel and you can submit it to the staff team here. If you have any technical problems, then do send them through to us. My colleague Ateem Arden is fielding those for you and will try and help you if she can. But any of the questions to do with the webinar content, then Claire and I will try and field at the end. We want to make this session as interactive as we can, so we're trying to run a series of polls throughout the session. When we have a poll, it will appear on your screen and you just select the answer that is appropriate for you. However, do note, we found that this only works if you minimise your screen, so you can only actually click on the answer you want to select if you minimise your screen. For some reason known to GoToWebinar, it doesn't work when you're in full screen mode. So now we've got the housekeeping out of the way, let's progress with the webinar. I think it's safe to say that the coronavirus has shaped the world and how we all behave. The impact on the recruitment experience is significant, and there are now thousands of people in the jobs market, making it once again a very competitive environment. There has naturally been a decline in face-to-face interviews, which is likely to remain for some time, even though we are beginning to relax social distancing rules in the UK. Now more than ever, a candidate needs to ensure they position their application carefully to ensure it is seen amongst increasingly large numbers of applicants for every role. This is a two-part series in which Claire will look at practical things you can do and consider to help you in this process. So first of all, just before I hand over to Claire, let us do our first poll. If I just launch that for you, and what we are asking you is, what brings you to this webinar today? I've just launched that, and I'll give you a few minutes to vote. I think most of you have voted now. I'll close that poll and I'll share the results with you. So, interesting statistics. A number of you are joining to improve awareness, but 20% are being or have been made redundant, and 10% of you are not happy in your current role. So I'll let you ponder on those statistics, Claire, as you continue. Let me just hide the poll and then I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Is everything in order?
Right, I've just handed over.
So, good morning, everybody. Not sure what to make of the 10% unhappy in their role. Is that good news or is that bad news? But anyway, that's interesting. Thank you for doing that poll, and we will do some others as we move on. So for starters, I'm going to show you this slide, but I don't want you to panic that it's all going to be about me. This isn't about me. This is about you in the middle. So as an outplacement consultant, what I do, and I'll often say we, because we often work on the same things, and I do collaborate, hence the work-life logo on the left-hand bottom corner there, which I'll explain a little more as we go along. But basically, when we start a program or consulting with an individual, we would expect to have them sit back and take stock of their whole career. I should add that obviously LinkedIn, I'm sure, would like to be seen as social media for everybody, not just for job hunters. But obviously the focus of today and the focus of my work is normally to position somebody to move forward, and most often that's for job hunting. It's not always, but again, we'll come back to that. So where we normally start is looking at reviewing their whole career, but looking at their life as well and what stage they're at. Aging stage, I sometimes call it. So what's important to them, things like their values, etc. And then their strengths and skills, and a huge emphasis on achievements, which I'm going to talk about again next week in the second part of this two-part series. So today, the focus is really on my brand, the bottom one in the pink circle there. And on my brand, we open that up. It's about communicating my professional brand. It makes me smile that many years ago we had to explain this. Many years ago we had to explain networking, and every year as we move forward things change, and we no longer really have to explain this. Maybe the personal branding was understood once it started being flagged up by, I think, the Beckham family probably were the first. But I think you'll all understand what I mean about your professional brand nowadays, and it's really important to be taking control of that. So social media is the circle, that's number 2 that we're going to look at today. Next week we're going to look at CV and obviously networking and interview. And interview comes into the preparation alongside the CV work. So today, the social media aspects of communicating your professional brand. So we're just going to run another poll here and have a look at what you're used to doing at the moment.
So I've just launched the poll for you. We're looking at what social media platforms you use for professional purposes.
The emphasis being on the professional purposes.
Yes.
Yeah. Now we only put a few answers. There could have been many more, couldn't there?
Absolutely.
I'm thinking Pinterest, for instance. But for some people, that is a professional purpose.
Yes, absolutely.
Most of us were just looking at plant growing or craft.
I've put the answers up there, so perhaps as expected, 90% on LinkedIn, but that's actually quite a high percentage.
And I think it's getting higher. That's the thing, isn't it? It's getting higher all the time. It's just creeping up in the background. I remember when I first went on it, there was nobody else with my name. But nowadays, every time you turn around and look again, it's grown and grown. I'll show you some facts and figures a little later on. So let's move on from that.
Okay, I'll just hand back over to you. There you go.
Okay, thank you. So social media, I've said here, is allowing you to be your own PR agent. Even the term PR agent is a little old-fashioned, perhaps, isn't it? But I remember meeting someone a while ago who worked in South Africa, and they said when you're a sole trader or an entrepreneur working for yourself, everyone gets a PR agent straight away. So I thought that our use of PR, we tend to think of it as something bigger for organisations. We need to think of it as something for ourselves in order to control your professional reputation and to take a handle on that brand that we were talking about. So I'm sure many of you have done this, but when did you most recently check what's already out there. So if you went to look yourself up, if you're Googling yourself, what appears? I remember looking up somebody in their Amateurmatics latest roles and reviews, luckily which were quite positive, appeared very first. Normally, if you're in LinkedIn, then that would help and it would fit through and that should come up first. But what else is coming through? And I'm sure you're all used to the dangers of Facebook nowadays. And quite often people have Facebook opened in a slightly different name, in a derivative of their name, so that it keeps the two separate. But overall, out there, as we call it, what is there that you're happy with? And does it give a consistent picture? I think that's the bit we have to think about with branding. We put our professional hat on. Is it nice and professional all the way through? So how do those different platforms portray you? Is it going to present a confusing picture? And for those of you who are looking for your own career, but possibly being involved in recruitment yourselves, you may have found that if you hunt around a little information about somebody. I have a friend's son who has a research role, very recently started, and his role is to do that hunting around. He doesn't work for a recruitment agency. He doesn't work for a recruiter. It's more people who are doing security checks. So the individual would know the security checks are going to happen, but they're not of the high level. They're not of the military type. It's perhaps a sign of the times that security checks are being done on just more regular roles as well. And so this guy's role is to look around, hunt around, and to see if there's anything that conflicts with what they think they see as the person. So it might just be that they've liked a comment somewhere, or they've shown some political leaning is really what they're looking for, or some values that might be at odds with what they were looking for. So I feel like that's going quite deep nowadays and quite broad. So even the things that we're not thinking about and we didn't show on that poll there, the non-professional things could present a conflicting picture of you. So you really have to sit back as if you are a PR agent and double check with yourself that everything is consistent and how you would want it. And then we have to look at how can we harness LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is the main one, and the poll showed that massively, and that's growing and growing, as I say, and seems to be still remaining the case. But how can we maximise your impact? And maximising the impact, and I've put there without irritating, because what we don't want to do is to find that somebody is overdoing it. So perhaps oversharing, over-commenting. You may have had it before with your friends that you begin to get a little tired of somebody that's always doing it, and you feel, I feel I get tired of the ones where their heart and soul is not behind what they have flagged up. In fact, maybe sometimes the article hasn't been fully read by them. So how much activity is constructive and how much of it is just for the sake of it and going to cause an irritation? So it's difficult to get that balance. So then how active are you on the other platforms, and does that matter? So yes, we love to do Pinterest, and you surely are allowed to have a personal social media interest as well. But what about the balance, and what do you really need and why? And remember, as I said, sometimes people will open a Facebook account in a slightly different derivative of their name. So that's sometimes a way around it. I remember a couple of years ago, I looked up, this is dreadful, funeral flowers, and Pinterest keeps coming back to me with how many people have liked my looking at funeral flowers, which I really wish hadn't been saved and flagged up regularly. So just bear that in mind. So some do's and don'ts on the wider usage of the social media. Many of these will be obvious to you, but let's just double check. So which sites are you using and are you happy to use? And really think about that. Understand all the settings. This is how you take control. And there's always more settings than we realise. And so it's getting beneath that surface and really checking all the settings again and again to make sure they fit with what you want. And that will control the privacy. So who's seeing what and when. Then updating it regularly. We lose faith with something straight away, like websites, when you look it up. For me, if I look at a restaurant and it's still got the Easter menu showing, then I kind of lose faith with it straight away. It might be a fabulous place, but if it's out of date, then you start questioning it. So your professional one needs to be updated all the time, which is why celebrities have somebody do it for them constantly. But somebody else doing it for you means it may not be authentic. And as I mentioned, you need to be consistent and authentic. So totally true to your values and how you want to be perceived, which should be the real you. So network with interest. Why are you doing it? Why are you asking to connect with somebody? So as I say, it becomes irritating if your activity is purely for the sake of it. So some don'ts, and we have to remember to keep the don't in front of it. So don't forget to proofread. We all do that, but again, it can be dismissed very easily as lacking professionalism if there's a typo early on. Psychologists, I see regularly misspelt by people who are in that field. They've just typed it too quickly, maybe. Don't forget to be mindful of sharing personal information. So many of us are more aware nowadays of identity theft. So things like date of birth, anything that is used to put together a picture of you, the banks will be terrified. And I'm amazed on, again, Facebook, how often birthdays, people haven't realised that that can be a huge security breach to let people know your birthday. So think twice about that one. Don't connect with everyone. On LinkedIn particularly, you'll get invitations from people. You kind of have to use your own marker. And it's quite interesting within different sectors what a marker is for when you will accept people or not. I know people in the finance industry who seem to be, whilst they're probably not natural networkers, seem to be more open to connecting with people they haven't met than others. So establish your own criteria, if you like, but I would tend to connect with people that I have met rather than just happen to attend at the same place something. Don't forget your audience. So you're not just talking to one sector or some people that you know. All these other people are looking as well, and things can be misread. So we have to be careful about our tone as well. Don't simply copy over your CV. So the CV is your document, and what I'm going to be talking about next week is making sure that you know how to adjust your CV and tailor it all the time. So you don't want one standard copy. So a standard copy being copied into the area where you can on LinkedIn or anywhere else, just simply copying your CV isn't going to work. So you need to think that through. It's going to form the basis of it, sure, and the facts and figures, but again, it's a different version. So don't forget you are what you share. So going back to your branding, this is what you're presenting about yourself. So let's now move into LinkedIn itself. And when I say random facts, these are totally random. The figures are always a little behind, and it would be interesting to see what's happened during lockdown. I suspect more people have become more active on LinkedIn because it was one of those things that often people meant to do more of, and without face-to-face networking, then it was a brilliant way to keep in touch with people. So these figures are from February, and I suspect that all the time they're going up. The one I like particularly is the 2 new members per second. So that might have changed radically during the last few weeks and months. Very random was the sectors, and Sue and I were smiling earlier that somehow this had become displayed in a larger font, as if I wanted to focus on the IT decision makers or the accountants. They were just 2 random sectors that I pulled out for you to have a look at. Job applications, obviously LinkedIn is becoming very well known for helping you just click straight through to do a fast track job application. So again, I'm sure that figure is growing every month. So it's huge already and growing every month. Once upon a time, I used to have to convince people why they should network and why they should use LinkedIn. And I do remember in workshops a lot of wariness early on. But I think we've really got past that. So hopefully you're no longer wary about using it, but are you using it fully would be the question. So all these things are things that you can be doing, and I guess should be doing. And ideally, at the end of an outplacement program, we would be suggesting that this is something you have to hang on to when you move on. So recognise that it's good to keep networking, not just at the time when you're looking for a new job. So you're building and controlling your brand all the time while you're using LinkedIn. And that's a huge thing for people within an organisation or standing out on their own. You're networking, connecting, reconnecting, and that's really what it's known for, isn't it? But you're also able to share, gather knowledge and information. We'll talk about groups a bit, any special areas, so you can show areas of special interest. You can follow places. People will wait to see what does your following indicate about you. You can find or advertise opportunities, and some of you will have come to this today because you saw an opportunity from the advert for this webinar, that maybe you haven't done one like this before. And perhaps the best nowadays that I find more and more of my clients enjoy is being found. So by making yourself particularly available, then people will come to you, and it's a shortcut for recruiters, be they decision makers in an organisation or from a recruitment agency, but they can come straight to you and say, you look like the sort of person that I need. And certainly I work as a freelancer, and probably the last people that I do some work for came to me through LinkedIn, so they found me. It's also great with the networking and the connecting bit. I would say I find it extremely useful just to refer to people. So we're not necessarily face to face. A lot of people don't have business cards anymore. So how do they contact you? How do they find out more about you? It's very easy just to say to somebody, look me up on LinkedIn. This is where you need to know if you've got duplicates of your name. And I would say, look me up on LinkedIn under Oxford. And they can find which one I am quite quickly. So being found, make yourself available to be found is a huge, huge thing that's becoming more and more important. So we're going to have another look at another poll that Sue's going to set up for you.
Okay, so we're asking you, how frequently do you check and update your settings on LinkedIn? I know where I fit.
I know,
everybody else is the same.
We all have a tinge of guilt on that one, don't we? And it feels a bit teachery to ask you, but we do need to be nagged because we should be regularly updating our settings. And as we'll see later, LinkedIn changes all the time. So it's making the most of those changes by checking.
I'll close that poll now and share the results. I think I'm with the majority.
Yeah, I don't want to be a teacher and be telling off, but just a little reminder that the more we do it, the more we're in control. Yeah, so it really is important to you. So enough said maybe on that.
Yeah.
So back to LinkedIn and looking now at your profile. So obviously this is what most people focus on straight away. And often when I meet people, they'll say, well, I'm on it, but I haven't got much there. So this is a gift horse of an area for you to work on and present yourself. And looking at these titles, these are not titles of the sections anymore because it's so fluid that these things constantly change. but they're terms that I'm using here. The titles of the sections nowadays are more like, are you open to work? What's your headline? About you? Featured, activity, experience, education, licenses, and volunteers. So that's the sort of modern version of how you can do it. But it is up to you. You do, again, have control of how these things show, where the emphasis is, and so on. But let's start with the header. You may or may not be aware that very recently, LinkedIn has altered this. So it's doubled the amount of characters that you can put in your header. So it has gone to 220 characters. Now, obviously, not all of this shows. So you have to always remember that someone needs to click on the bit to show more. So what is it they see before? So it's still important that the emphasis is on those first few characters that will show before they click at all, because maybe they won't click at all. So you have to make sure that you're encouraging them. And normally we would say to people, you are many things. You have many professional titles. Some of them may be used in-house for where you are currently, but the open market may view them differently, or you may view them differently. So how are you going to pull it down to a few words that are the right words to describe you, to capture the interest without them clicking? So some people feel that 220 characters is going to be too long for that header section, that that's better off being further down. Again, I would suggest that you look at a lot of other people, spend time on raking through LinkedIn profiles of people you know and people you don't know, and you'll start getting a feel for what you like and what you don't like. At the end of the day, like a CV, it's up to you. There are no do's and don'ts, but think of your audience and what's going to be appealing, and unfortunately, it's always what's going to be easy for your audience to make it quick. So think very carefully about the words you would use in that header so that the different terms are covered all in one go. The headshot photo. Again, I think people now know that, and the figures vary, but it can be, some figures I've read have been that you get 22% more viewings when you have a headshot photo there, which is a big difference. I think it's also useful if you're not sure if you've met someone or remember them from the past, because it then fully helps that, even if it was years ago. But what sort of photo? And again, I don't want to be the teacher and be nagging, but I had somebody once do a presentation on the photos and pulled them out, went through thousands and did a presentation with hundreds of photos, hundreds of not very good photos. And they tended to be some photos that were from a long way off, so they weren't a headshot. So, or holding something. That might be a child, it might be a puppy, or it might be concentrating on the view. So here is me on the top of a mountain. And there are some fabulous photos like that, but this really should be a headshot photo. So headshot to me, it is like the old back of the Penguin book. So what it says, a professional one, professionally done. You can do them yourself, but they're never quite as good. So sometimes it's worth investing in a professional one. So very important. The background photo or whatever it might be is hugely important too. And I'm constantly surprised at how many people haven't realized how easy that is to change. So there's a default one that we all have, and it makes us look the same except for zooming in on that headshot photo. So please, please have a look at your cover picture, your background. If you haven't got one, think carefully about what that might be. That might be the place for the mountaintop, but it might also help reinforce your message. If I give you an example, I think it was 2 years ago, I had a guy came to me who wasn't sponsored by a company. He wanted to pay for some help himself because he'd arrived in this country from Sweden and he had 120 job applications and he hadn't had the interview. This guy was a finance director. He was quite a big cheese. And I felt the problem was people didn't feel he was staying. So he changed his background photo, and he had moved to Bristol, and he put the Clifton Suspension Bridge as his background photo. We also changed the rest of the LinkedIn profile, but I really feel that photo helped ground him and show that he's here to stay. So it makes a big difference. So those two easy things to do. Your experience, really think hard. We like achievement wording, not just job description wording. Put your proud hat on and focus on the particular bits. The recommendations, you ought to have several. So how many of us have good recommendations, and how comfortable do we feel with those recommendations? Are they saying what you want them to say? And are you inviting the right people to comment on those? You can hide them, and you can invite people, and I would get a variety. So I've tried to recently get people at different age and stage to show that I'm not just dealing with executives of a certain age, I'm dealing with all sorts as well. Education, let's not overdo it. Again, think of what's going to be important and relevant. Skills and endorsements, really make sure you manipulate the labels there so that the skills that fit what you want to call it show, and the top 3 or 4 are really showing. Endorsements have got a little better, but in the past they weren't seen to be very realistic or great. Interests, be personal, yes, but not too personal, the oversharing, and accomplishments, be proud, definitely. So let's look at some trends and changes and tips. So more and more, as I said, people will find you. So think of it as opening yourself up to headhunters. What a marvellous opportunity. In the States, they believe it's already the first for B2B, business to business marketing. So if someone is looking at doing consultancy or looking at doing portfolio where you might work for yourself as well as a job, this is going to be the best tool for you, which has changed most recently, I would say. It was set up for networking. Remember the old friends reunited? That's where it sort of started. And others have tried to get in on this patch, but LinkedIn is still way ahead of anything else in this field. We know Microsoft bought it. That has got implications for things like Word, for going through to making what they call resume. So there are some tools that fit with it that have joined since Microsoft took over, and you'll watch more of those. We were all quite cynical watching to see how the revenue might be changing, and whether they're trying to make more money, generate income was going to happen. That hasn't happened as much as I thought, which is quite interesting. Job applications I mentioned earlier. The dynamic and evolving, it's often not always realised, but we are in little bands, if you like. And the bands sometimes come with the timing of when you joined, and the bands sometimes will be that you've been in a target group. So when you're talking to your friends about it, what they're seeing for their profile may be different to what you're seeing for yours. So when we review, we have to really look at somebody's. I can't just be telling somebody about theirs because their layout may be different, because LinkedIn will target a certain particular population to trial things with. So again, dynamic, but not across the board. Be careful. I call it your shop window if you're an entrepreneur or a contractor of any kind, which means you don't necessarily have to have a website, which is brilliant nowadays. It, I believe, has still retained its professional stance. A little bit of advertising has crept in, hasn't it? But not too much. I think it's still quite tolerant of it. I've mentioned the headline. The ability to allow you to shine beyond your job title, to have your own branding out there in a public domain. And when you've worked for a big, strong brand, that can be really quite refreshing. You could still be with them, but you can have your own within that as well. And that's great, even if you're not ready to move on yet, but to build towards your next career step, wherever that might be. Premium level is a bit of a debate. Do we or don't we? And Sue's watching the chat and the questions, and I suspect that will be one of them. Is it worth it? So maybe we'll come back to that if we have time and it's in the questions. Sharing, comparing, constantly talk to other people about how they're using it, what's working for them, and don't just fit with your way of using it. It's really good. So AI, constantly on the agenda nowadays. Do we like the algorithms? We have to accept them. They're not going to overtake everything for recruitment for some while, but they are the basic way to deal with a lot of volume. So we have to get to terms with what are the algorithms behind it, like keywords, searching, etc., and how can I make the most of that. Just thrown in there some of the top soft skills that are quoted currently. So creativity, always a difficult one when you put that in a non-creative environment, isn't it? I think I prefer the term innovation, but there we go. We'd be shocked if cloud computing wasn't there under the hard skills as well, wouldn't we? So another poll there just to ask you some questions.
Yeah, this is
okay?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Are you okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just launch that one. So we're asking you, how often do you like, share, or post a relevant professional article on LinkedIn?
Some of those are easier to do than others, aren't they?
They are. I think I'll just cover more voting now. Okay, I'm going to close that one and share the results. A split between weekly and never. That one. Interesting.
So again, it's about getting a balance. There's no, prescription for you should be doing this, you should be doing that. It needs to fit with what's going on with you at the time, what's going on in the activities that you're following, and it needs to again fit with your overall branding. But it is something that we get out of the habit of. I remember people used to say, just do it on the train on your way to work. So without a train journey on the way to work, when are people going to have time to do that? Is it going to be over their coffee break at home, or is it just doing it on their phone as opposed to waiting until they're sitting down at their laptop? So I think it's about making it a habit that's fairly consistent and just being aware of your level of activity or not, rather than prescribing to you how it should be.
Yeah. Agreed. I must admit, I did a lot of mine on the train.
Yes. And people who have a quick daily commute, that's an easy way to do it.
Yeah.
But not necessarily the same. Okay. Are we all right to move on?
Yeah. Yeah, back over to you.
No, I'm not moving on.
There you go.
Have you seen that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So I am a fan, but I'm a cynic as well. And therefore I just felt obliged that we should look at some of the limitations as well. It's not all singing, all dancing. It's not going to be the answer to everything. It's probably such a gift as a tool for job hunters that I can't even say, but we need to be aware of some of the limitations. So one that irritates me particularly is when I have people, I mentioned earlier that I would call myself in the portfolio arena. So I do some voluntary work, I do some employed work. I'm an exam invigilator, not very busy at the moment, but that's employed. And I do portfolio, which is why I did the helpline alongside outplacement as well. And LinkedIn doesn't work very well for that because it's run on boxes. And because it's run on boxes, then like any database, there are frustrations. So you have to manipulate the boxes to make it work for you. And probably the most difficult one is the current, because it doesn't allow for anything other than current. So are you job hunting? Have you finished that last job? Was it last job or was it current? So you have to put something in the current box, and that we don't want that to show as the job that you have left, because that would look like you're masking the fact that you're no longer there. So you have to work and play with them to make them work for you. And a lot of people still want to be on LinkedIn when they're retired, and it doesn't sit well for that either. So make those boxes work for you is what I'm saying, and keep playing with it, which leads to little scope to adjust. You can't often alter it, but you can hide things, you can take things out, and you can reorder them more than most people realise. So that gives you some scope to adjust things. So I talked already about the being on top of your settings and the privacy and all those other controls. So again, suddenly you'll find there's an opportunity to do more. A huge one at the moment, I used the term at the beginning about open to work. Not very long ago at all, that this was only to be shown to recruiters or those with a recruiter license. But now it can be shown to everybody. And yesterday, for the first time, I saw someone with a headshot and the circle around her headshot photo, a green circle that says open to work. That's such a label, and not one to shy away from, because then people will come to you straight away. So certainly that's the sort of thing, that example that has changed very, very recently, and many people won't have caught on to, but is a fantastic thing for to help to be found. So don't be shy on that one. Therefore, I've mentioned different levels of licenses. I think most people are aware that there are different levels of licenses, and if you pay, you get a bit more access, and if you're a professional and you're a recruiter, you're allowed to get even more access. So what comes with that is changing slightly, and that comes with income generation, doesn't it? The jury's out whether you need to be spending on it or not, I would say. So will a new platform appear and take over? There have been some new ones appear and try, but they haven't caught up or got anywhere near. And that was before and since Microsoft took over. So, as I say, no one thing can be all things to all people. And though I love LinkedIn, it does have its limitations. And I have a love-hate with social media. So be wary of the things about LinkedIn and other social media in the same way. So that's the end of the slideshow. Is it possible that we can have time? I think I've talked quite a lot, but do we have time for any questions?
Well, actually, as it happened, you ended up answering the questions a few slides later. So we've done quite well with covering the questions that had been answered. I'm just going to take the slides back. Hopefully you can see the right screen. And I think we've also run out of time, so we perhaps will move on. But if you have any subsequent questions, you will have the opportunity to send them through to us. You can email the contacts you had when you were sent your joining instructions. You can email us any further questions that you have. I did also want to say a particular thank you to Claire for helping us today and giving us a very interesting overview of how you can enhance your job hunting skills. Something that is a bit of a different one for us. We normally aim things at the employer, but it's really nice to aim something at more wide scope. And thank you for that. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is a two-part series, so we are going to be looking at focusing on CVs and interview preparation in our next one, which is next Tuesday, the 21st of July. You can register on our website if you look at upcoming webinars, if you haven't already done so. As I said, if you've got any further questions, you can either email inquiries@hrsolutions-uk.com. We can pass them on to Claire if it's specifically for Claire you would like to talk to, or you can just respond on the invitation email. As always, we welcome your feedback, so please do send us any feedback as to how we can improve webinars or anything else you would like to see or that would support you in your quest for looking for further engagement. And finally, just a thank you to everyone, to Claire for presenting and to all of you for attending. Thank you very much.